Good morning. Happy Saturday, which is not normal for me to say. But I'm so happy to be here, and I am grateful and honored even that Matt would ask me to come and share with you this morning. Like Eno said, we've become really good friends over the last couple of years, and I'm just so pleased that we've gotten to know each other. And I think you already know this, but what an incredible leader that you have in Matt. I love having Matt around. And coming to share at my church, which he has done from time to time. In fact, he did it earlier here in July. One of the things that's been huge in my own life is a transformation about the way that I see God. A lot of our conversation here in churches or in our gatherings is about our participation, how we respond to God. But that becomes very performative in a lot of different ways, where we feel like it's on us to reach towards God and that God would do what we would want Him to do, perhaps, in some way like this. But something transformational has happened in my own life as I've begun to see earlier on, and now it's come more full to how God sees us, why God comes for us. And so this morning, as we're walking through today, I want to draw our attention to a story in Mark chapter 5. A man that Jesus crossed the sea for. I realize that Matt calls him Yeshua. I'm going to keep calling him Jesus just because Yeshua is I'm going to bungle that one up. So I know it's all the same thing, but there's a man that Jesus crosses the sea for, and he lives in tombs. He can't be chained. He hurts himself. He's the person everyone has given up on in his towns, including probably himself. Jesus sails across the lake specifically to reach this one guy, then sends him home as the first missionary to the Gentiles, people like myself. For anyone who thinks that they've gone too far, this story is for us. So there's a big idea that I want to communicate here today, that there's no one and no part of you that's too far gone for Jesus to come for. The only question is whether you're going to let Him land in your life. The anchor that I really want to hold us to today is that Jesus sees you, even the part that you stopped showing Him. Let me introduce you to this guy whose name nobody bothered to write down. We didn't get his name, we get instead his address. And in this story, the address tells us everything. In Mark 5, verse 1, it says, So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. There's three words, the other side. And in these three words, it's doing a whole lot of work for us this morning. Jesus and His disciples have crossed the Sea of Galilee, and if you've read the few verses right before this, the crossing has nearly killed them. A storm has come up on the sea that's so violent that grown men, fishermen, who had spent their entire lives on that water, were certain that they were all going to drown. And Jesus stood up in the boat, and He told the storm to be quiet, and it was. But here's what I don't want us to miss in this. He did all of this. He does this journey. He sails across with His disciples in this storm. He crossed the lake, told off the storm that terrified professional sailors to get to the other side. The other side was Gentile country, was foreign country. The wrong side of the lake, so to speak. The side you don't go to. But He didn't drift there, and He didn't get blown there by the storm. He set out for this space. So why would He do that? Verse 2 shares with us why He sets out for this. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet Him. And there's our answer. There's why He crossed. One man who lives in a cemetery. Now Mark slows the camera down, and he shows us this man up close. And I want us to actually look at him this morning because the instinct, the second that this gets uncomfortable, it's going to be our instinct maybe to look away. Verse 3 keeps on going on. The man lived in the burial caves that could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains or shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrist and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night, he wandered among the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. I'm going to sit in this for a second. I don't want to rush past it. He lived in a graveyard among the dead because he no longer had a place among the living. Somewhere along the way, the towns decided that this man belonged with the corpses, not with the people. So that's where he was, out past the edge of town, where you bury what you don't know what to do with. And the community had tried. It wasn't like they had given up. I want to be fair to them. They tried. They tried to do the only thing that they knew how to do. They tried force. They tried chains. They tried shackles over and over, as he often was, Mark says. It was like a routine. And every time he tore through them, no one was strong enough to subdue him. Think about what that line is admitting here in Mark. Everyone had taken their best shot at this man. Everybody's best shot had failed. The strongest, most determined effort the community could put together, and the chains came off in pieces every single time. Day and night, Mark says, no rest, no quiet, not even at 3 a.m. in the morning. And then the detail that's the hardest for us to read, perhaps, cutting himself with stones. This man was destroying the one person no one else could save. He was destroying himself. I know some of us in this room know exactly what that is. Maybe not with stones specifically, but turning the pain inward in on ourselves and making life even harder and worse, being the one who's doing damage to ourselves. And I'm not going to rush past that this morning. I'm not going to try and leave it there either. I want to hold on. There's more to the story because the story is speaking specifically for us. I have to be honest about what Mark says is going on here, even though I know it'll make some of us flinch, perhaps. Mark doesn't call this man's issues a medical condition. He says the man was possessed by an evil spirit. And I know that sounds, in a city like ours, kind of odd. We're trained, and a lot of it it's good training. But we have a category for everything. A diagnosis, an explanation. So when the Bible starts talking about evil spirits, a modern reflex is maybe to file it under the first century people didn't really know a whole lot better. But I don't think that that's what's going on in the text at all here in Mark. Mark isn't being clumsy. He's being really clear. He wants us to understand that there's a real enemy in this story. Demons had gotten a hold of this man and it was wrecking him from the inside. And it was stronger than he was. This was not a man having a hard season. This was a man held captive by the power that he couldn't break. The Bible takes evil very seriously as a real thing, not as a bad mood or as a bad environment. And if we're going to take Jesus seriously, we have to be willing to take seriously the thing that he's come to confront. So here's why I'm slowing down on one unnamed man in a graveyard. Because every single one of us has a name for too far gone. For some of us, it's a person. Somebody you've quietly filed under hopeless. Somebody maybe you stopped praying for. Not because you intentionally decided to, but because nothing changed and you got tired. They're in the cemetery in your mind. Cut out, put away, put aside. It's hard to deal with. You've buried them while they're still alive. But the one I'm actually after this morning may be a little bit even closer to home for you and I. For a lot of us, it's not a person out there. It's actually a pattern in here. Something in our own life that you've stopped bringing to God a long time ago. You tried. You put chains on it. You tried accountability. You tried willpower, a new system, a fresh start every January, which was pointless. And it was never strong enough. Snapped the constraints every single time. So at some point, you quit fighting it. You didn't surrender it to God. You just learned to manage it. You decided that this part of you is the part that doesn't change. And in this story, that's the man in the tombs, the most alone human being in the Gospel of Mark, in the most God-forsaken place God or Mark could describe. The dead on one side, a herd of unclean pigs on the other, and an enemy inside that can't be beat. And somebody got out of a boat for this man. I don't want to lose that. We're going to come back to this. Why did Jesus do this? Why did Jesus come all the way across the lake for this specific moment? Why would Jesus cross the sea through a storm that nearly drowned his closest friends to reach one man in a graveyard who everyone else had already given up on? Watch what happens the second he steps onto the shore. Verse 6. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, and bowed low before him. This man runs, he falls down, and then in Mark 5:7, he said, with a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." Now stop and notice who's begging. The man that no chains could hold. The man no one was strong enough to subdue. Jesus shows up, and the thing inside this man is already on the ground begging. That alone tells you the contest is over before it even starts. I know it says that I like to watch sports, which is very, very much true. You know, the one thing that's worse is when the game is over before it's even started. It's no fun watching that. And here we have this moment of this man who's just laying there begging for this contest to be over. It's no contest at all. And notice what he calls him, Son of the Most High God. The demons know exactly who Jesus is. There's an irony running throughout the entirety of the Gospel of Mark. The people who ought to recognize Jesus keep on missing who he is. But the demons never miss. The towns didn't know who would come ashore. The disciples, half the time, they didn't know either. But the thing in the tombs took one look and knew precisely who it was dealing with. It isn't confused about his authority, it's instead terrified by it. Verse 8, Mark says for us, for Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And he replied, "My name is Legion, because we are many of us inside of this man." Legion is not really a name, it's a number. A Roman legion is somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 soldiers, an occupying army. That's the word this thing reaches for to describe itself for us here. We are many. We are an army. We have held this man like a conquered country. Here's what I don't want to miss in this. It doesn't matter. An army or a single chain, 5,000 or one. It's all face down in front of Jesus. Whatever had this man was incredibly real. It was strong. It was more than he could fight, more than this town could fight. And it was no match for the Son of God, not even close. Look at how this ends here. Verse 10. Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. "Send us into those pigs," the spirit begged. "Let us enter them." So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. They beg. Again, they negotiate. They negotiate from the floor. And the same lake that Jesus has crossed and just told to be quiet on the way over is the lake that swallows the whole thing. The chaos that ruled this man for years goes down into the water and is gone. Back in Mark 3, a couple chapters earlier, Jesus said something that explains this entire scene. He said, you can't break into a strong man's house and carry off his goods unless you first tie up the strong man. Jesus now is saying, I'm the stronger man. I'm the strong one. The town brought chains and it lost. Jesus brought a word and won. He didn't strain. He doesn't wrestle to a draw. He spoke and it was over. So I'm hoping you hear this because it's the whole heart of what I'm trying to communicate this morning. The thing in your life you've decided is too strong. It's too much. Jesus is stronger. The pattern that snapped every chain you've ever put on it, He's not intimidated by it. The thing or the person that you've quietly filed under hopeless in your life, He's crossed worse water than that, for worse cases than that. He didn't wash up on this shore by accident. He aimed at it. He crossed a storm, stepped onto foreign soil, walked out into a cemetery, and went straight for the one man in the whole region everyone else had written off. Because that's exactly the kind of person that He came for. And now this man is free. In a moment we're going to read verse 15, but he's sitting down. This man is sitting down. He's clothed. He's in his right mind. The most dangerous man in the region is calm and whole and himself again. And you would think that everyone would be thrilled. Everybody would be excited about this whole new development. But they weren't. And that's where the story turns. And where it stops being about a man in a graveyard and starts actually being about maybe you and me. You think that the people in the towns would throw a party. A man their whole town had feared for years. The one that they'd chained. The one that they'd exiled to the graveyard. The one nobody could do a thing with is sitting down, he's dressed, he's calm, he's himself again. That's a miracle. That's the best news this town has possibly heard in years. But here's how they actually respond. Verse 14. The herdsmen of the pigs fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were afraid. They were afraid, not relieved, not amazed, afraid. They look at a man who's been set free, and what they feel is fear. Why would that scare anybody? Because a power that can do this, you cannot manage. You can live next door to a problem you understand. The man in the tombs was awful, but he was predictable. He was a known quantity. A man you can chain, even if it's badly, is a man you've got a category for. But a man who can speak to whatever that is and have it obey, you can't predict him. You have no idea what he'll do next or what he might ask of you. And that turns out to be scarier than the years of a man screaming in the hills. And they do the math. Verse 16. Then those who had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. Notice what made the report here. The man and the pigs. Don't skip the pigs. I understand that, as a Gentile, I eat bacon and things like that, and Matt looks at me and just goes, every time. But don't skip the pigs. 2,000 of them just drown in the lake. That's not a footnote. That's an economy. That's somebody's livelihood. That's somebody's savings. That's somebody's whole business gone down the hill into the water. And the town does the arithmetic. One man's freedom on one side and the cost of keeping Jesus around on the other side, and they made their choice. Please leave. Sit with how stunning that is for a minute. The Son of God is standing on their shore. He's just done the most powerful, most merciful thing these people may have ever seen with their own eyes. And they ask Him to go. They would rather have their pigs than His presence. They would rather keep their economy and their quiet and their manageable little town than live next to a power that frees but also costs them something. Now here's where the story really quits being about them. If you walked in this morning afraid that you might be like the man in the tombs, now maybe you didn't come in with this kind of context, but you're feeling and walking through this idea that maybe you're too far gone, too broken, too much. The stuff that's going on in your life is too big. The good news is already here in the text for you and me. Jesus crosses the sea for people like you and I. Just for people like you and I. Not the context of like He loves the world that we see in John 3:16, but instead very personal, very specific. Jesus loves you. Jesus loves me. He cares about you, and He cares about me individually. Maybe you aren't seeing a connection to the possessed man this morning. Maybe it's going right over your head and you're like, man, Steve's talking about stuff that just, oh my goodness. Can't wait till Matt gets back, talks more deeply about Joseph, because that was a wild series, y'all. Maybe you aren't seeing the connection between you and the possessed man. The bigger danger for you isn't being exiled by others into the tomb. It's actually instead responding like the town. Because we do the math too. We don't scream leave so well in Seattle. We're too polite for that. But we keep Jesus at the property line. We give Him Saturday. We'll give Him our singing. We'll give Him our feelings maybe. Or the parts of our life that are already going fine or we think that are manageable. But there are rooms that we've quietly decided in our own life that it's not acceptable. We don't want Him to go there. Because we ran the numbers, and the cost was really, really high. You can have my Saturday morning. You cannot have my calendar. You can have my feelings. You cannot have my phone. You can have my songs. But you cannot have my money, or this relationship, or my ambition, or the one appetite that I've made peace with and just come to grips with it, come to the moment of it's just who I am. Stay out of the room, Jesus. That one's mine. That one, if you come into, this one costs too much. There's a popular podcaster who grew up in the MTV era, from my era, his name's Theo Vaughn. And he has a very public way is processing through faith at this point in his life. And recently on his podcast, he describes the exact tension that we're describing here in Mark chapter 5. But Theo is reading through John chapter 5, where Jesus asked the man at the pool of Bethesda if he wants to be healed. Which is an odd question because that's why everyone was at the pool of Bethesda, to experience healing. The reality of Jesus asking the sick man makes it very real for Theo as he's processing whether he really wants to be healed himself from his own brokenness, because his own healing will cost something, and that means that he will have a new story. So he begins to process through the question, do I actually really want something different from my life? And very vulnerably and authentically, he processes through and he says a lot of times the answer is no, I don't want something different. I like what I know because I can manage it. Keo kept going, and he said, the problem with a new story is that we are often really comfortable with the old story. We know how it works. We know what the feelings are. We know who to be angry at. We know how to operate. We know who not to give love to. It doesn't matter how dysfunctional it is. We know how to make it work. So let me connect all this back together for us this morning. Do we really want a new story? Do we want a new story for ourselves? Do we want a new story for someone else that we've written off in our life? Because that's exactly what has happened here with this man who is living in a cemetery. He has a whole new story now. We are people who worship a God who crossed an entire sea for a stranger, and yet we won't let him cross a hallway into one room in our own house where we keep locked up and saying, no, this one's mine. And here's why we lock it. Go back to that line I started with here this morning. He sees you, even the parts that you've stopped showing him. We lock that room because we don't want it seen. We know that being near Jesus means being seen. He sees us more accurately than we even see ourselves. And being seen means it will cost something. Change always costs us. So we manage our exposure. We keep him close enough to comfort us and far enough that he can't reach the thing that we're protecting. But to be honest, let's be honest about that thing that we're protecting, what it actually is. Go back and look at the demon-possessed man one more time. The tragedy wasn't only that something held him. The tragedy was that the thing had been destroying him for years. It's that thing holding him that's destroying him, and he couldn't get free, and everyone had quit trying. That locked room in your life is not a room you're keeping safe. It's the graveyard. It's the place that's quietly costing you the most. And you're guarding the door against the one person strong enough to walk in there and set you free. Jesus isn't standing at the door to condemn you or I, or condemn the room. He's standing there to clean it out. The town got it exactly backwards. They were afraid of the only one on the shore who had come to help them. There were two responses to Jesus that day. The whole town said, "Please leave. We cannot handle the change. We cannot handle what's happening here." The man with the news story says the exact opposite. In verse 18, chapter 5, says this: as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. He begged. That's the same word Mark has just used for the demons. They're begging, please don't send us some far away, send us into these pigs. Now this man is begging the same word. He's begging to go with Jesus. He wants in the boat. He has spent years unable to be near other human beings. And now he can't bear the thought of Jesus sailing off without him. And Jesus tells him no. I want to be careful here, because Jesus' no wasn't rejection. I want to look at what it actually is. Verse 19, but Jesus says no. Go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful He has been. Go home. Tell your family that watched you lose your mind. Go back to the town that chained you, the neighbors who drove you out to the graveyard, the people who crossed the other side of the road when they saw you coming. Go back to all of them and tell them what God has done. There's that word again, the new story. This man has a new one now. And his very first assignment is to go carry it straight back to the people who only ever knew the old one. The ones who knew him as the screaming man in the tombs are about to meet the man who's really got a story to tell. And he does it. Verse 20 shows us that so the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed at what he had told them. Look at that. The man from the cemetery becomes the first missionary to the entire region. Jesus sails back across the lake, and this man fans out across the 10 towns, telling anyone who will listen what Jesus has done for him. The most alone human being in the story becomes the one telling everybody. The man nobody could say a word to is now the man nobody can shut up. That's what a new story does. And don't miss how he got it. Go back to verse 15. When the crowd showed up, they found him sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane. Clothes. Somebody put clothes on this guy. And in his right mind, he was handed back himself. He did not clean himself up and then qualify. He didn't get a few things in order and earn the right to be helped. Jesus crossed a sea, walked into a graveyard, and met him exactly where he was, at the very, very bottom, and gave him back everything. The clothes were a gift. The sound mind was a gift. The new story was a gift. None of it earned. All of it given for free. That's the gospel. That's what Jesus does. He crosses whatever he has to cross to get to you and to me. He's stronger than the thing that has you all bound up. He meets you as you actually are, not as you're pretending to be. He gives you a new story, and then he sends you home with it. Go tell other people what I've done for you. So let me make this concrete before we're done here this morning. If you identify with the townspeople this morning, and many of us do, many of us are, at least some of the time in our lives, there's a room that you've kept him out of. You know the one. You named it in your head 20 minutes ago and hoped that I'd move on and wouldn't come back. But here's my invitation to you. This week, open the door. Not to the whole church, to Jesus. I'm not trying to out you in public. I'm saying take your stuff to Jesus. Say it out loud to him in prayer. Jesus, you can come in here too. Come work in this area of my life. Come and heal this brokenness. Come and heal this space. Come and heal these chains that I'm bound up in. Set me free. And then I'm going to ask you to do something a little bit more challenging. Tell one person who you know you can tell. Somebody who can walk with you. That's the first step out of the tombs every single time. It gets said out loud to somebody. If there's a person that you've written off this morning, this one's much more personal for me. Maybe buried while they're still breathing. Then the question Jesus is pressing you in on is the one that we heard earlier. Do you want a new story for them? Do you want, you don't have to manufacture a feeling. Just start praying again for the one that you quit praying for. It was too far gone. It was too much. It was too big of a problem. And some of you, this story has been describing something very real in your life. The addiction you can't beat, the spiral that you hide, the cutting, the despair that shows up day and night, the way that it did in the hills here in this story. I want you to hear me carefully. You're not too far gone. And you were never meant to fight this alone out in the tombs. Here's where we started. He sees you, even the parts of you that you've stopped showing him. The man in the tombs was the part of himself nobody would look at, the part the whole town had locked outside the walls. Jesus got in a boat, crossed a storm, stepped onto foreign soil, and walked into the one place where everyone else avoided, to see the very thing that no one else wanted to look at. And he still does that. He sees the room that you keep locked. He's not pounding on the door to shame you. He's the only one strong enough to clear it out and to hand you a new story. The town asked Jesus to leave. The man begged to come along. And Jesus has a reason for sending this man with his story. What story does God want to create? What new story does God want to create in your life? So that the world around you, the people around you, the neighbors around you, your coworkers, your family, your friends, that they can hear and see who Jesus is because Jesus has done such a good thing inside of you. Let's pray. Jesus, we come to you this morning, not putting on some sort of thought of who we are. We come to you as just real people. People who have been too far gone, people who are too far, in our own minds, too far gone. We've written off ourselves. And yet, Jesus, you came for us. And I pray, Lord, that even right now in this moment, that as people are interacting with the truth of your story here today, that God, you would begin healing and freeing and rescuing even right in this moment. For those we've written off because they were too much, they were too far gone, they did too much damage, they were creating too much chaos. And we buried them in our minds and acted like it was easier, behaved like it was easier, treated them like it was easier if they didn't exist, rather than bringing them to you and saying, Jesus, will you please heal? Will you please repair? Will you fix? Will you restore? God, may you heal us. May you heal those who are around us. May you heal those in our world. May your kingdom come, Jesus, right here, right now. And may we carry that story of the good work and the good news that you have done in us, that you've healed us, you've put us back together. And God, I pray that you would help us to never shut up about how amazing you are. Thank you, Jesus, for giving us a brand new story. Thank you for inviting us into a brand new story. Give us the courage today, Jesus, to take that step. In your name we pray.